Aurelian was the first capable emperor that the empire had seen in years, and in only a short period of time he was able to defeat the Gauls and the Palmyrenes, thereby reuniting the empire. What took place during the time of Aurelian is of particular interest to our study. The worship of Baal, originally introduced to Rome by Elagabalus in 218 AD, was once again brought from Syria back to Rome by Aurelian some 55 years later, when he conquered the Palmyrenes. The irresponsible emperor Elagabalus was unsuccessful in establishing the worship of Baal, but not so with Aurelian. During his reign, the worship of the sun god Baal under the name Sol Invictus would come to be accepted as a personification of all the Greco-Roman sun gods. First, a little history regarding the Palmyrenian Empire. With Rome unable to defend the eastern provinces from their surrounding foes, Septimius, the governor of Palmyra, Syria, took charge of the legion stationed there in an attempt to defend his territory. At that time he was proclaimed king of Palmyra by the soldiers. Only a short time later, Septimius was assassinated and his son became king. But here our story takes an unusual turn. The real power behind the Palmyrenian throne was the new king's mother, Zenobia. Directing the armies of Palmyra, she conquered Egypt, Syria, Palestine, Asia Minor, and Lebanon. Coins from that era depicting Zenobia bear the inscription Augusta, the feminine form of Augustus, a title first held by Caesar Augustus, a title reserved only for emperors. The actions of Zenobia were perceived as a threat to the Roman Empire as a whole, and in 272 Aurelian marched on the Palmyrenes and defeated Queen Zenobia in the Battle of Emea near Antioch. Only a few months later, Aurelian would crush the Palmyrenian armies and bring Zenobia back to Rome, where she would be paraded in golden chains as a symbol of Aurelian's conquest. Zenobia must have been quite an influential woman, for she did not remain in chains. Aurelian placed her not in prison, but in the luxurious estate known as Hadrian's Villa outside of Rome. There she could enjoy the beautiful countryside with its waterfalls below the Temple of Vesta. Historians report that soon Zenobia would become the wife of a Roman senator. Why all this attention to Zenobia and the Palmyrenian Empire? Well, the reason is that Aurelian brought more back to Rome than Queen Zenobia. He brought back to Rome the temple treasures from Emesa, and with them the worship of Baal. Baal would be renamed Sol Invictus, the invincible sun, and later emperors, worshippers of Sol Invictus, would proclaim aspects of that worship to be Christian in nature. Ms. Murdoch is right about December 25th, but she's wrong about the Jesus of the Bible. Neither he nor his disciples would have had anything to do with the celebration of the birthday of the sun gods of antiquity. Theologians know that, but because they have failed to say so, they are now challenged by their own misleading doctrine. Zeitgeist attempts to associate pagan narratives with those found in the Bible regarding Jesus. Acharya states that the mythological character Jesus is an amalgam of 20 mythological characters, a myth from the beginning. What we're not being told is that there are many different versions of each myth. By picking and choosing, the producers of Zeitgeist present selected parts of mythological accounts and somehow fail to tell us the rest of the story. The Jesus of the Bible said that Moses wrote of him. The New Testament plainly states that Jesus was the creator, and all throughout the Old Testament we read that the very precepts that Zeitgeist attempts to associate with him were considered to be abominations. Yeshua, Jesus, the Messiah of Israel, would have never had anything to do with those precepts. An attempt is also made to associate Jesus with Easter and the worship of the fertility goddess. While being right about the pagan nature of Easter, once again they are wrong about Jesus. The Jesus of the Bible was not crucified at the time of Easter. The Bible never says that. He was crucified at the time of Passover. It was almost 300 years after the birth of Christ before the Council of Nicaea set that date. Even then, what they did was actually change the date for the observance of Passover. Theologians know that, and so do the producers of Zeitgeist. In interviews, Ms. Murdoch speaks of many pagan gods, including Horus, Seriphus, and Mithra. She talks about the abominable worship of Tammuz as spoken of in the Old Testament. The Bible condemns that worship. She attempts to somehow associate those gods with Jesus. She's right about the Jesus being presented by most theologians, but she's wrong about the Jesus of the Bible. The Bible never associates Christ with pagan precepts. It is the theologians who have done so, and many scholars, impressed with their credentials, have believed their lies. Not long after the Punic Wars, Rome set its sights on Asia Minor and Mithridates, king of Pontus and northern Anatolia. After the death of Alexander the Great and the division of his kingdom, Pontus had been founded by a man named Mithridates, who was the son of a Persian ruler by the same name. And of course, the name Mithridates reflects respect for the sun god Mithra. From 88 to 63 BC, the Mithridatic Wars were being fought between Rome and Pontus. The first war led to Mithridates' loss of his territorial claims in Asia to all but Pontus. He was, however, during the second war able to defend his remaining kingdom. Later, alarmed at Rome's aggression against neighboring Bithynia, Mithridates once again went to war with Roman forces under the command of General Pompey. This time his entire kingdom would be lost. Now I realize that we have just spent a great deal of time in review of history that can become a little tiresome to those of us who are most interested in Scripture. But in order to understand not only what has happened, but how it happened, we just have to stop and do that. Why is all this history important? It is because that while Rome was busy with the Punic and Mithridatic wars, the worship of the sun god Mithra was in the process of pirating his way into the empire. Without competition from the seafaring Phoenicians of Carthage, who have been defeated by the Romans during the Punic Wars, the pirates of Cilicia, those who were allies of Mithridates, had taken control of the Mediterranean and as many as 400 coastal cities. And as you may have guessed, it just so happens that those pirates were worshippers of the sun god Mithra.